Faith and Honest Conversation with Thomas Rowland and Radio Hand and James Farrant.
I guess it's me.
I know. Which way are you? You're there. So yeah, we're here to. Great start. We're here to talk about faith and be as honest as we can. Not judging, not saying we got the answers, and really wrestle with the questions and wrestle with the experiences that it brings to us. And yeah, if you ever want to be involved, please do get in touch. We'd love to be exploring things live with you guys, or be exploring any questions you have. That would really enrich this, I think. And basically, on a selfish note, it would enrich our own conversation and our own experience with faith. So please do. We'd love that. So James, last week we kind of ended on you giving this really clear, really lovely summary of what you wanted your legacy to be. And I loved it, and I rewatched it again earlier today, and again loved it again, and it really hit me. And I was expecting, we're going to be there, and then you're not feeling it, James.
Well, I just can't. I can't remember. So I think probably one of the greatest legacies that I'll leave behind is this this sense of like confusion. Maybe even more on my part than anybody else's. But yeah, my memory is terrible. I am told it doesn't get better with age, unfortunately. I've got all sorts of little tricks and tips that I use to help myself. I think it's wonderful that we're recording this because it does mean I can rewatch it and remember. And yeah, did the same. Like tried to remind myself of where I was, and yeah, certainly there is that sense in me. I wanting to leave behind the mark that I want to make on the world. Is not like some great deep impact or big like sort of invention or anything like that. Nothing groundbreaking, nothing that hasn't been done before, nothing that hasn't been said before, but but certainly something that does change people. And I suppose part of it comes from like looking at people around me and knowing people around me and how we affect one another, and almost like the smallest things can really make or break a day. And so for that day, we talk about living in the moment, being present, and being like mindful with things. And if we end up saying something or doing something that has a positive impact on any one person's day or any one person's life, for that moment you've changed their world, you've changed their whole experience, and made an impression. And I think that's, if I hear like people talking about fairly recently things like being anti-racist or anti-misogynistic or whatever it is, anti-homophobic, where you really fight against the various ways that we are as humans horrible to each other, and I kind of get a little bit disheartened by it. In all honesty, I hear it and I think, yeah, I get the sentiment and I get where it's coming from. But there's a part of me that goes, you're kind of fighting hate with hate, and that's only going to lead to more hate. It's not going to make people change. It's not going to make people different. We have to approach one another in a way that is positive, is empathetic, is understanding, and has the power to change and power to bring people forwards and to help people move. And that we're almost like in a place where we see gender and sexuality and all of these parts of our identity as quite fluid. And I personally think quite rightly so that for a lot of people those things aren't static, aren't like set in stone, aren't just what you're assigned to as at birth or however it is that you've come by it. That there is more to it than that. But then when somebody doesn't understand that, meeting that sort of head on it with a quite an aggressive or militant stance ends up just creating more division, creating more fractures and fissures in the way we are as society. And in order to be different, in order to change, and in order to allow others to change, because that's, I think, the main argument I have, if you like, against that approach is you end up polarizing or create forcing people to defend their standpoint or their stance, even if it's like really outrageously wrong, really like unpleasant, because you've come in at quite an aggressive approach, and that naturally, we as humans, if we're faced with something that offends us or is an attack on us, we will defend. And so it's natural for that to be the response, and it's natural for people who do feel offended to go on the offensive. So where am I going with this? Effectively, what I'm trying to say is that then if we change our approach and keep our approach fluid, then we can start to allow others to do the same. It gives people permission to be different. And so that's where the kindness comes in, that's where the compassion comes in, that's where the empathy comes in, by being different in the face of quite strong opposition, or quite strongly held views that are maybe things that we really disagree with or whatever. You're then able to have a conversation. You're able to understand, because there's always a reason for people believing what they do, however faulty the system is beneath it. There's still a reason, and the only way that will change is by very, very gently and encouraging that person to take another look, to have the chance to question themselves. And that, it's taken me 34 plus years to get to where I'm at. These things don't really happen overnight. And that I suppose our beliefs and our faith is evolving continually, and it's not a static thing. That's not really the legacy element that I've touched on there.
No, I think I'm just trying to think it through, and I think what you've done is kind of branch it off, which is very you, James.
Oh yeah,
trying to contain you into one thing is impossible, isn't it? But that's great. I love it. I love it. So I'm just gonna try and bring it back a little, and then we can go off again. No, it was great, and I think what I got from it was that legacy is all about what mark do we want to have made in our life, really, given our death as well.
Yeah,
like it's we've got a finite amount of time. What are we going to do with it, and what's our mark going to be, or what's the difference that we will have made? And part of that difference is I remember the real word that got to me last time was kindness. And I think kindness comes from a place of not fearing. Kind of other weeks we've talked about, are we in the house of fear or house of love? And in kindness you can't be in fear.
Yeah.
Or it's very hard, or kindness will take you out of fear anyway.
Yeah.
And I think you're exploring now the possibilities of kindness, and where we can, I don't want to say where we can get stuck, but maybe this needs exploring a bit. But there's something about, okay, we want to have made a difference, we want to make our mark in our lives, let's do something big, let's change this big social injustice or social prejudice that's happening. And I think that can be a driver for getting involved in big things, because we want to have made our mark, and I get that. I also really got from you this idea of how do we meet another person who is in, I'm going to say, in fear. So another person who we hold to be prejudicial or discriminatory or oppressive, or have oppressive, discriminatory, prejudiced views, and those views are in our society and are causing divisions, and they're divisions of fear, I think I'd want to say that. So how do we meet people in that? And by meeting people, we, like, the divisions naturally dissolve, don't they?
Yeah, well, I hope so.
Yeah, often, at least for a moment, at least for that moment of meeting.
That's it.
They have to dissolve.
Yeah,
we can go back, but for the moment, we've tasted meeting, I think, and that really struck with me. That idea of meeting another person who really disagrees with you, or really not, but just on moral issues almost, isn't it? Or on something key. How do you meet somebody there? How do you change their views? Should you be changing their views? Is that going to help? I think that's really, really rich to explore. And I think what you're saying is that we only change when we're met with kindness.
Yeah, I think so. I think that we only change with real substance. So it's only like a true change if we're met with kindness, or we're struck by something like compassion, or I guess kind of, coming back to the house of fear, house of love thing. It's when we're struck by something that brings us closer rather than drives us apart. If we're met with violence, or met with anger, or met with other fear, that will only serve to push apart. That doesn't in any way bring people together, and it's only, I think it is only by us coming together that we see change. And through that, we then, it's through the coming together that we start to grow an understanding, and then the empathy begins, and it's that empathy that causes like an internal change. When you see the actions that you've wrought, the consequences that they've wrought on another human, that you then feel akin to for whatever reason. And you can only feel akin to them if you haven't isolated them, haven't driven them apart, or they've come to you in a different way. And I think that's partly why Martin Luther King was so powerful and so inspirational for change, because he was peaceful, exclusively peaceful in his protests, and he got a lot of backlash for that on both sides, of the movement. he did have like people who called on him to fight in a different way and fight violently and reach for a gun. But I think for him, he knew that wouldn't have as profound an effect as being peaceful, as being I guess like an emblem of that kindness and an emblem of that compassion, because obviously he did what he did because he could see that stuff needed to change, and that he was in a position where actually he could do something, and the way he chose to do it had a much more profound effect. And I suppose I often wonder about people like Martin Luther King Jr., where if he hadn't died, if he hadn't been assassinated, what would life be like now? Where would we be? What more would we have seen from him and from others? How would he have inspired people if he hadn't been martyred when he was? And I guess it's a bit of an irrelevant question, isn't it? Because we can't go back and change the past, and actually what happened did happen, and maybe he wouldn't have had as much impact if he hadn't been assassinated. I don't know, but yeah, I suppose like the direct comparison I would normally draw would be with Malcolm X, and like he has gone down in history as a much less kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Where you uphold somebody. He's much less upheld as being a big part of the civil rights movement as Martin Luther King. So I don't know. It's really hard to say, and obviously like we're only looking at it through our lenses, and I can only see it from where I am, and yeah, but I feel like if I can make a difference by being kind to people, then that's what I will be remembered for, and at the very least, I won't have created more division by being kind. At least that would be my hope. That would be my hope.
Yeah, I really feel that sense of not wanting to cause more division, not wanting to add to that. And I'm struck with this kind of paradox, really, that I'm thinking back to when there was these discussions in a church context that I was in, and how do we get people who are who do have different views, so from quite a conservative church background, so who are gay or who have sexualities that the church disagreed with, like how do we get them to change? And it, in a sense, it's a different conversation because there are different power plays at play and things, but in a sense that it's the same conversation the other way around, and I think what we're saying, or what we're getting towards, is that actually, if we want to invite change, instead of backing away and say you've got to come over here, and then you drive them into kind of their territory and having to stand their ground and having to stand on beliefs that maybe they're not sure about, but they've got to stay there because you're attacking them in some way. So to change somebody, or to invite change, or to even have a possibility of change, you've got to accept them as they are, exactly as they are, which is a ridiculous paradox for certainly where I've been brought up in. You change by kind of willpower and things, not by accepting. But that's it. That And you also change by getting close to the other and almost together with the other.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing with that is that you will change.
Yes.
You know, like the encounter will change both of you. And I'm just struck with all that needs a lot of faith. You know, like to hold those paradoxes, to hold all that, and that I can enter into that and leave with my own integrity, trusting in this something good coming out of it. Maybe it's not what I want, but I don't have control over the other, and I can't control over it all. I've got to have faith. I've got to be in that house of faith or that house of love to touch them and then to leave, and to touch, to leave. And yeah, it's just a very different way of causing change, I think.
Yeah, and I think the thing that really struck me there with what you were saying, Tom, was that it changes both of you. That neither of you will leave the same, and I think that's certainly for when it comes to the church and people of the LGBT plus community, that there's been such a huge amount of pain and a huge amount of hurt that has happened there, and a huge amount of and the hurt is through rejection, more probably, and I hesitate to say it because like I've only had like a limited experience, but as far as I can see, so much of the hurt is through rejection, and so accepting somebody and accepting them for who they are, where they are, and who they choose to be, who they are, and who they've been made to be. That's massive. That can only serve to be a good thing.
Yeah.
And then like the whole, I suppose, the whole idea of change for me there, it's more about the change of and the change that relationship brings, and the growth that relationship brings, and then the realization that everybody has got something different to bring and a different perspective. And so like I certainly for where I've ended up and where my faith is at is that I don't think that people need to change their sexuality or need to change their habits surrounding sex and their sex lives and their habits and their like identity. I think that's very much something that where I've ended up with my faith is that God accepts them exactly as who they are, and so I will accept them exactly as who they are. And I kind of I guess I find it easier to talk about where it's like an obvious injustice, insofar as like with like civil rights, that there's an obvious injustice and inequity and inequality there. There's an obvious injustice with like misogyny and so on there. And when it comes to LGBTQ matters, I'm much more in the mindset of it's that there's been massive inequalities and equities, but they've been more on the part of where I've come from than on the part, like they are the oppressed, not the oppressor. They're the people who actually need to be championed and need like a voice and to be welcomed and accepted without any, I suppose, expectation of change. Whereas on the flip side, with like civil rights, actually, it's interesting, isn't it? Because like I think of all of these things, and I'm like, whoa, I'm definitely on the wrong side of most of it. Like, yeah. So I think of that with with people of color, and particularly in the States where it's still really really rife, and it still is here in the UK, but it's not as visible. And we've had a lot of good talks about this at work, and it's been incredibly eye opening. And I still feel like I know practically nothing. I still feel very much on the periphery, or like the very beginning of my journey of that. Like exploring it. There's so much there that it's sort of like, yeah, if somebody's being oppressed, it's obvious that the oppressor is in the wrong, but at the same time, the oppressor needs love, and that's why there is the oppression going on. That the oppression is happening because there is a sense of incompleteness. And so, or a sense of inadequacy, that's quite a hard word to say, or like something like along those lines, where the oppressor doesn't feel good in and of must exercise power. So it comes back to the power dynamic that we come to frequently. And so that really, like, what I would want to use my faith for, and with regards to legacy, is to lend my power to redress that balance, to rebalance those things, so that I'm not like sitting on the sidelines and allowing it, but going, hang on, no, I'm going to go and move myself where my power is to where there is less power. And so I want to move towards the people who I feel are oppressed, or who are oppressed, who are obviously oppressed. So, and in doing so, I'm I suppose I'm moving away, and I'm drawing away from where I see the oppressors to be, but with a view to then encouraging more of that flow, that sort of like concentration gradient, to steal a phrase from chemistry, where you've got like a power over here, and that's where like the structure is, and the institution is, or the system is, but that's all made up of people, and it's all made up of people who have got that power. And then you've got over here, there's the people who are downtrodden, and actually what we need to do is help that power shift, so that it is more of a level playing field, more of a I think that's probably the best way I can explain it. I think I've kind of drifted a lot there again for a time.
Yeah, I think what was I thinking? That flow of power is a really powerful metaphor, but I disagree with it, I think. Or at least I reacted against it. Let's stick with that for now. And I think the reason is I just don't think it's going to happen. And I just don't. No, maybe this is it more precisely. The institutions have a certain form of power, and I think that power is always going to be oppressive. So, and I think I've been reading a book on it about, they call it patriarchy, and this idea that there is this power structure, and it's a hierarchy, and it's all about dominating, or kind of climbing up the ladder and dominating the people below, and I think a lot of the institutions are stuck in that, and I kind of think that's probably rife, in a sense that it's not going to be shifted. And we can see equality as, okay, we've got all this power, let's bring people over here where they can start climbing the ladder fairly. And you give them enough, and usually the education is the route to do that. You give them enough, education is your route to climb the ladder, and then we'll work on upping the top, because there is a ceiling to most of this, so we'll work on upping the top so it's a bit more fair. We'll work on getting more people up here from everywhere, but you still got this power structure.
I agree, yeah.
And to be honest, I don't see that flowing. I feel that very static, kind of clinging to itself. It's not gonna happen. But what you said, and I think this is maybe where you were going, or feeling it maybe, was you said about relationships and everybody bringing a bit. And I think for me, that's the key bit, and that's where the power is going to flow through us as we let people bring their bit and do their bit, make their mark on the world. And as we unleash people to do that, that's when, and that's, what was I saying? I think, when I can think about what difference am I going to make, I can think about, okay, it's this, what I've had control over. But when it becomes about me in relationship, somehow empowering or taking away some of the limits upon other people, probably mostly by just touching them as another human, then they are empowered to make their difference, and it kind of spreads out, and you then get onto this whole flow of power that kind of is coming out, but it's not just about me making this big difference. Is that making sense? I don't know if that's...
Yeah, totally, and I can totally relate to that. The sense of like this, the power structures and the institutions not being fairly implacable and immutable. But I mean, there's a part of me that really hopes that they can change and really hopes that it's possible. And part of me that agrees with you wholeheartedly. I don't think that they're going to change. But and my response really to that is that I take my power out of it and don't keep trying to push myself up the ladder at other people's expense, but instead meet people who are either not on the ladder or not in that, like, or who are just oppressed by it. And I think I guess part of me sees it as those power structures, they oppress not only those who aren't in it or aren't on it, and but also those who are within it. In that there's this driven, forced sense of I must get better, I must get above this person, I must get the competitive nature of it, and the kind of striving nature, which I think for me it's the most terrifying, because it becomes quite so insidious, because we do have that drive within us anyway as humans. We do have that competitive nature. We do have that wanting to be seen, wanting to be noticed, wanting to be the best or whatever, and I say that knowing some very young people, and that's what you see very clearly in children, is that you've got this like sort of almost like it's sort of like a self-centered nature of just wanting to be known for something. There's a like, I need to be known, I need to be seen, I need to have achieved. And I guess what I'm sort of saying is that I'm shifting my idea of aspiration and my idea of success and my idea of climbing away from here to actually it needs to be out here, and it needs to be a horizontal thing, not an upward thing. So that as you said, it is about relationship, and it is about like making connections and making sure that those connections have an impact that is good for me and good for them, not just like, oh, if I do this, then I will get a promotion. If I do this, I will have achieved blah blah blah. You know, it becomes less of a James-centered approach to life as a humanity-centered approach to life, and a relational. But yeah, maybe not. Yeah, a relational approach to life, as well as a humanitarian centered. I can't remember what I said now. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah. And I think at the same time, that is going to be about James. You know, that is going to be about you growing and you experiencing kindness and you being healed as well, and you having your mark. But that's the mark in a relationship. It's not the mark climbing up a tower.
Yeah. I'm not trying to stick my flag right at the top and just like getting rid of my flag and going, okay, where are we gonna?
Yeah. And I think there's a couple of things. I know we're kind of going over time, but I'm really enjoying this. So we'll see. Do a little bit more. A couple of things I was just thinking of. Like, I think there's a tendency in this to get frustrated with the power structures that are there. And particularly from a Christian kind of story, we then become very small. And I think, you know, there is probably a place for that, but there's also a place for us being big in our power, in the relational sense, in that kind of collaborative, sharing, flowing, relational power, that might actually mean we're very high up that tower, you know, but it's in a different sort of mode, I think. The other thing I was thinking with this idea of lineage and the mark we make is, and I think where I want to go is kind of, and maybe this is more a overarching belief that is forming in me, that this kindness, and I think I want to pick up on that metaphor of flowing. Like, this kindness is flowing, and in my Christian view, that kindness is flowing in a very hopeful way, that's going to flow towards the Golden City in some way. And it's happening, you know, it's kind of filtering all the way through as it flows into me, and as it flows through, and as it flows through you. And it's been happening since the beginning, this flow of kindness. And so my legacy isn't so much about what have I done, it's about me stepping into that flow and being part of that flow, which is much more hopeful than trying to work out what on earth can I do to make a difference here. Absolutely. You know, stepping into a flow that I have hope is going to make a difference and is going to completely transform things in one way, in its kind of meandering way, as it trickles through, as it flows, whatever. I just have to step into that flow in the concrete realities where I'm at now. Yeah,
I absolutely love that. And I love how it then becomes not dependent on us, and not relying on us doing it. That we are, so by stepping into it, we're joining in rather than creating it, rather than generating it. And you know, I know from my own flakiness that it just nothing would happen.
Yeah.
Nothing would happen if it was dependent on me. So there's a massive relief to that, and I absolutely love what you're saying there, Tom. That's really good.
And that takes it like back to the start where you said to me before we were talking, I'm not feeling the same like this week, and I think that's true. Like I at the beginning of this conversation, I was probably in the house of fear, you know, and I probably start most weeks there, and very little is flowing in that place, but that doesn't mean it's not flowing. No. And you know so I think that's great what you just said, that, you know, it takes the pressure off, but it is there to step into at the same time.
That's really good.
Cool. I think we should finish, unless you've got something really to finish with.
That is a profound point to end on. That's lovely.
Great.
Really,
we'll finish there.
yeah.
Guys, thank you for tuning in. We will see you same time again next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Take care, guys.